welcome into another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner. Ahmed, lots to get to on the show. Let's start it off with what we just, an ugly thing that we just watched. The Terps fall in Minneapolis, now 1-3 in the conference, 6-9 on the season. And, it was an ugly one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, even the first half, didn't exactly go, I wouldn't say went exactly pretty or went, according to plan, but still Maryland was able to come out with a 7-point lead. To just watch it just completely deteriorate like that in the second half, really felt like once Minnesota got going, Maryland just had no answer. Really disappointing, especially a chance. One is a team that you've historically done well against in the Big Ten, but kind of going into these next four games where you kind of look at the schedule and say it's kind of this is kind of that final stretch for Maryland to see if they can finally muster up something. Really disappointing outing.
Yeah, it certainly was. And at one point, I looked at the stat sheet in the first half, and the Terps shooting percentage was around 70%. They only taken the 2 3-pointers, both of which they had made, but the turnovers were certainly there at that point. I believe they had 7 at that exact moment. It stacked up towards 10 going into the break. And in the second half, when the baskets weren't falling, the turnovers continue, multiple players in foul trouble against a team that just frankly has not been very good this year. It was just really another instance of ball just does not go in the basket for these guys.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that we talk about, Maryland having that 7-point lead, but they had 15 turnovers in the first half. And, the end of the game, obviously, with 20, but just kind of for Maryland to struggle like that. Obviously, Julian Reese, the way he struggled, foul trouble just kind of across the board. Kalen Swanson-Roger just also, again, kind of look average at best in the limited role that he played on Sunday as well. So just like you said, I think it was pretty evident just kind of throughout this really the first half of the season that it's Jameer Young or bust until the supporting cast really steps up. And again, on Sunday, Jameer Young stepped up again. But again, I think it's just really disappointing. John Harris Smith, the body language just kind of looks off. Jamie Kaiser kind of looks like he's forcing it and kind of just trying to put it together. Again, just kind of overall really just puzzling and disappointing overall.
Yeah, it's not coming from anywhere but Jameer Young at this moment for this team. CSR, you mentioned him. To me, he's really a 0 on the floor for Maryland, if not a negative in his minutes, which is a step back from kind of where he was at the end of last season, where he gave Maryland at times, especially going back to the Purdue game and against Michigan, against some of the better bigs offensively in the conference, gave Maryland really, really solid defensive minutes when Juju got into foul trouble. And I'm not saying, he was a perfect backup center to a team that can make a deep run or anything, but serviceable at times, sometimes a little bit better than that this year. So automatically there's 2 fouls, on the stat sheet the second that he enters the game. Kaiser's forcing it right now. Scott just does not look like the same player. He hasn't found any sort of groove this year.
Yeah.
And look, between Patrick Emilian, Ian Martinez, Don Carey, this team lost production that it just hasn't found. And I won't say that they didn't necessarily replace it, even though that's the end result. But with Kaiser and DHS not being able to score any points, Scott taking a step backwards, CSR taking a step backwards, and we haven't even talked about the Purdue game where you got 0 points from Juju. That's just, that team's not going to win games.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Purdue. Obviously, I think that going against ED, I think it's a tough matchup. Willard talked about it post game. I'll give him some credit. When he talked about just the Reese's tendency to try and pull Edie away from the basket, because obviously if you're trying to back him down, we all kind of know what that fate looks like. But again, when you talk about just with the supporting cast, we talked about Jordan Geronimo, who really kind of has shown flashes and through non-conference play, but really against the lesser known opponents. And again, against Minnesota, finished 0 points, zero shot attempts, 2 rebounds. So again, when you talk about kind of the outgoing production and 3-point shooting, Maryland was able to do a little bit today, 4 of 12 from deep. But Akeem Hart and Ian Martinez statistically, I believe it was only 0.3 percentage points higher, but he did lead the team in 3-point shooting last year. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that Maryland was kind of looking at the outgoing production and looking at kind of what was coming in and maybe what was expected of them. And, yeah, you kind of needed them to live up to what was expected. And between the transfers and between the freshmen, that they just really have not shown those flashes or consistent flashes, really, that Merrill um, needs in order to win. And that's kind of why we've been talking about, it's been Jameer Young or bust for Maryland. And really for Dante Scott, it looks like the really only times that he finds success is when he kind of reverts back to what he's been comfortable doing his first 4 years here.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And when you look at the like you mentioned Geronimo, and I think that he's in kind of I would say the most unique position out of anybody on this team right now because he's the guy who plays at the fours, never been great, never been a great offensive threat. Has shown you mentioned it, has shown flashes, but ultimately him and Julian Reese, they're just in a awful spot because if they do their jobs 100%, they're down there, they're scrapping for offensive rebounds, they're fighting hard in the defensive end, but right now, the minute they touch the ball, if the team that Maryland's playing isn't doubling them, they're almost doing themselves a disservice because why not give this team an open three? They're in the mid 300s in 3-point percentage shooting as a team right now. I don't even know. I kind of came across this the other day. I was watching, I guess it was Florida and Kentucky on Saturday. They're talking about how to even rank in the NCAA 3-point percentage as an individual, you have to average making 2.5 threes a game. And for a while, I was sitting there thinking, do we have one player that qualifies for that? Maybe Jameer Young does.
Yeah.
But you look at this team statistically, and they are historically, in the terms of Maryland basketball, bad offensively. And now it's starting to spread down the stat
Yeah.
sheet. I mean, for a while they were top 100 in like steals per game. They were a good defensive rebounding team. Those things have also they're falling into the 110 rankings. They quite possibly by the end of next week, if they don't have a good like steals per game average, be sub 100 in every statistical category on the street on the sheet.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of bounce between what's more concerning, what Maryland's kind of shown offensively this year, or what Maryland should look like next year offensively without Jameer Young. I mean, again, this is considering Jameer Young really playing hero ball, 37 points at UCLA, and again, 20 points in the loss today. 5 of 17 shooting. Again, it's all very concerning, and for still, you're returning your core. Obviously, Akeem Hart, that's a big piece, and Ian Martinez, not a core guy, but I guess you could say core guy, but a rotation guy, a core part in that rotation. Um, but again, it's very puzzling to just kind of see so many of these pieces that looked comfortable just really look unfamiliar, and it's really it remains just one-on-one one-on-one iso ball for Maryland, and again, it's just been disappointing. I think kind of with all the high hopes and kind of what fans saw in year one, it's really concerning. And again, this is we touched on it briefly, but just kind of with this coming off the Purdue game, a chance to really start off the new year with that marquee win after Maryland showed the signs of maybe steadily building momentum against those lower non-conference opponents. These last two performances have been nothing short of humbling.
Yeah. It's bad when you look at the calendar and it's January the next year and we're still talking about pieces that could have been on the team or what's kind of come apart year over year with guys that could have returned. That just pretty much tells you all you need to know about this team. And look, they will welcome a Michigan team that's I would almost put it in the same boat as Maryland right now after a loss in the Palestra to Penn State today. I believe they're 6-10 on the season. They are not having a good year. Obviously, all the drama off the court with Jawan Howard and that whole situation going on and kind of derailing what was also supposed to be a team in the upper half of the conference that is not in good position at this time of year.
Yeah, and again, I think the vote of confidence for Maryland there is that Maryland's returning home for that one. So again, it's a chance to maybe kind of stack up some confidence. But again, this 4 game stretch, I think, obviously with that Minnesota, Michigan, and Illinois at Northwestern. I mean, I think that's really pivotal stretch, and to really have 3 of those 4 games. Potentially winnable, but mainly on the road where you're kind of able to subdue some of these concerns. For Maryland to just kind of watch it slip away like that on Sunday afternoon was just disheartening. And like you said, Mason, it's just not a good team right now. But how they'll bounce back on Thursday will be interesting. And I'm sure head coach Kevin Willard try and figure out a way to figure out the shooting problems once again.
Yeah, you sure will. Last thing I want to talk about on basketball, the crowd the other night was the number one team in the country. I feel like, can't really talk too much about the state of things with Maryland without talking about the showing or lack of showing from the fans. And Ahmed, for me being there, it was disheartening and sad to see that many empty seats with the legitimate, not some early season kind of, like I'd even throw like a Gonzaga comes to College Park and on at a bad time on a weeknight. But no, 7 o'clock coming off a holiday weekend for the Terps. Obviously, a big push with all the promos with the wall tickets, the student section tickets up for sale, but not much response from the fans.
Yeah, and again, it's sad. I know we think we talked about it a show or two ago, but just I'm still hesitant that even in my time when Maryland, wasn't exactly great, right after Gary, it was kind of just a lot of what if questions, really. The wall promos were still focused around students and filling up, but it didn't for lack of a better word, reek of desperation for Maryland, and to still see. Granted, my guy Jason Belt, he does a good job covering all the games in College Park, so he was there. But yeah, I mean, to see so many empty seats around Xfinity, and I think I saw some folks say, granted that this is second half, but you're still seeing sections half full. And again, yeah, the last 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't think that was something that you really expected in College Park. Or if Maryland was playing a home game, you expected it to be a great atmosphere, and didn't matter what the score was at around the 16 or 12-minute mark. You kind of expected Maryland to feed off the home energy and eventually pull it out. That's just kind of statistics showed that was just what was likely going to happen. But yeah, like you said, it just feels like there's just no juice. And then it kind of goes back to what we just kind of talked about, just the fact that you just lose that from year one to year two. But yeah, it's definitely disheartening. And obviously, football is going to be your bread and butter in order to bring in the money. But for Maryland to be known as a basketball school on a national scale, yeah, it's not good.
No, it's not. And you mentioned, feeding off the crowd, and even it felt like when Maryland, you almost want to, I guess I will call it, they started to push a little bit and make some shots really late into the game where they didn't have a chance. You were still heard being in the building. Just felt like people were waiting for anything to really cheer about, any sort of push of momentum that even in those moments you were like hoping if they get it to 12, you were going to start to like feel that Maryland home environment because while not every seat was filled, I will say when there were moments where there's something to cheer about, it's still a good venue to play a game in. It's that we haven't reached a point, and I think we will see it starting Thursday where it's just empty,
Yeah.
plain empty. I mean, that Purdue game, while there was more empty seats than you expected, there were a lot of people in the building. It's still, it holds one of the bigger college basketball venues there is. So when it's 80% filled, you do get a really, really solid crowd for a college game. It's the coming weeks, actually really the coming month of basketball that's left with teams like, Nebraska at home on the schedule. That's not one that Maryland necessarily sells well anyway for. And start to look down. You mentioned the financial piece of it. This program needs to win for Maryland to be in a optimal competitive money situation in the race of arms that college athletics is, where we all know the Terps are behind on the fundraising piece. So they rely on the ticket revenue. They rely on that stadium holding 18,000 and being filled with that and everything that comes with that, at least during the conference season. So without that, you see the ramifications.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, we're talking about a program that's now committing tens of millions of dollars in an indoor facility to get them on par with everyone else. And in an NIL era, yeah, again, I think this is you're kind of really going into really pivotal offseason. But again, I think it is just kind of overall concerning. That's kind of why I was talking about why I kind of saw the other side of why Maryland would try and just generate Purdue promos, and at this point just try and just fill the atmosphere, because again when you're able to kind of recreate it, and obviously if it comes out in a win, you're more likely to get fans to come out, and if you're able to eat that cost for that one game, so be it. But again, I think that's kind of why you're looking at this next 3 4 game stretch. Maybe you do get some people out from Michigan, but you're kind of losing that last chip where some fans wanted to say, oh, I want to see Hunter Dickinson for that the revenge game. And obviously Michigan's Michigan. It's a Big Ten game, but yeah, I think if Maryland wins one of the next three, but especially if they go winless, it's going to be Xfinity is going to be what the Danny Manning era looked like.
Yeah, it definitely is. Ahmed, let's turn the page over. Or yeah, you want to throw,
No,
throw
I
some
was I was just gonna say again, it's just sad for year two of a basketball school. So the last Big Ten school to win a national championship. So still, it's just wild to just watch this. So, but hey, Mike Locksley to save the day, huh?
Yeah, certainly is. But you know what? That made me think. All the hype that just came with it, and I know we basically said the same thing now probably 4 or 5 times in it. To see all the like this guy coaches like Gary, he's got the fire on the sideline. All these people that came out of the woodwork last year when they're winning games that were like, hitting me up for tickets with the seats that we have, and just the tournament and all that stuff, and getting to the second round, getting that win, the recruits coming out of high school. I mean, you just start stacking up all these wins for the program that is program building wins, and to see all the air just fly out of the balloon this fast is got to
Yeah.
have some people in that athletic department just shaking their head, walking away, not wanting to come to work, whatever you want to throw out.
Yeah, again, it just makes it just makes it this is Maryland. It's Loxley says it all the time, and I think every Maryland fan knows this. It's going to be an uphill climb for Maryland. So yeah, to have these puzzling results. I mean, Maryland's won 16 of 18 games against Minnesota. What is it? And yeah, I mean, to just have this unravel again in year two. But again, we talked about the similarities to Gary, the fire, all of that felt applicable. I mean, it just there's part of the eye test where you're looking at it and saying the energy from year one to year two is not the same. And I also think it's time that we kind of acknowledge that the Tony Skinn and Grant Billmeyer leaving was a pretty big impact. And sure, Mike Jones he's a heck of a guy to add on to help recruit locally. But you're looking at on court, and we're starting to see on court, and both those guys, Tony Skinn, who was known for his development in the backcourt, and Bill Meyer. We also, I mean, again, the fans. It was evident to fans that year one, or I guess, yeah, that jump from Julian Reese from the Danny Manning era to Willard. So again, I think there's going to be some a lot of questions to answer, but a pivotal offseason concern for year three. But take two, Mike Loxley to save the day.
Yeah, and he does a big piece. You mentioned recruiting locally, and I think the Terps got one of the best in the business back in College Park, Ahmed, and a change in the defensive backs coach or the corners coach. Tell us about Czar back in College Park.
Yeah, again, I don't know how this kind of came about, but there was a lot of buzz kind of through the season that this was kind of in the cards, but it sounded like this kind of came to fruition over this past week or so. Yeah, it sounds like he'll be back in College Park next week, and obviously this is a huge ad for Maryland to add a guy, obviously former assistant who spent a lot of time at Maryland, was really the driving force in Maryland's local recruiting efforts. Went to Boston College, was the driving force in Boston College's recruiting efforts in the DMV, and again, I think his connections from his time at obviously head coach at Friendship Collegiate did a really good job. Yannick Ngakwe, Jermaine Carter, Derwin Gray, Jalen Tabor or Tease Tabor, I think is what he goes by now. All these guys came under Azar, so I think his success and what he's done is well documented. And obviously, he comes to Maryland as co-defensive coordinator, where he gets to work with Brian Williams and fills that cornerback's coaching spot, replacing Henry Baker there, which is he was on an expiring deal. I believe that contract officially expires on January 31st there. So, but again, I mentioned on the site, the timing of the news was a bit unexpected because, frankly, the whole staff was on vacation this past week, just kind of not vacation, but just try to detach, after the bowl game. It's been a long season. Try and decompress a little bit, and then get back in the building this upcoming week, and then kind of reconvene. And that's kind of when we expect maybe some more news to start materializing. But I think this is a big, huge first domino. Should have some reaction news from a local recruit starting Monday on his R to Maryland. But again, I think he's a guy does a really good job just connecting with kids locally. So I think think a couple of years ago in the Durkin era, what the biggest hurdle was for Azar did a really good job connecting with kids. But a lot of the feedback that you heard sometimes was, "I love Azar, but I don't know about Maryland." And I think that the feedback since then about Maryland is, and I think also the way that Maryland recruits is a lot more collaborative, and I think guys are a lot more receptive. But I think Azar coming to Maryland is just kind of another experienced local recruiter with a lot of the local ties to kind of help reinforce and frankly lock down a lot of this talent in what's a pretty deep 2025 class.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I remember, meeting him when he was like kind of came onto the scene at Maryland with DJ as the head coach. And you just listen to a guy who's got a lot of passion for this area, a lot of passion for Maryland, what he could do there. And then, when Loxley came in, he was one of the guys everybody kind of circled, and they're like, can they retain him? And seemed to be maybe some not the best relationship between those two guys at that point. But look, Loxley's done it now, and he's added so many pieces back to it with Josh Gaddis, a guy who had a kind of a run in with, to keeping Maryland guys connected to the program, to now getting really what turns the staff into a DMV centric recruiting, powerhouse here at home, and maybe turns the tables back to Maryland being hyper DMV focused in the upcoming class. And there's a ton of talent here that the Terps will have the chance to close on.
Yeah, and I think again, I think I will say, just kind of on the relationship. I will really the last 2 years or so. I never really heard really after year one. Really felt like a lot of things kind of got smoothed over, and you really heard a lot of there are no problems, like we're good and all that. And I don't know if it was like directly like one-on-one hangouts, but I know that they've kind of been together in the off season over the last couple of years at various events, things like that. But again, just like kind of reiterating what we said, just a monster local hire. And again, a guy that no secret that he's always kind of wanted that defensive coordinator role. And I think, he and Brian Williams can kind of work well together. And Brian Williams has kind of always had a big name chasing him over these last couple of years. But, and he's done a good job staying at Maryland and had that path and whatnot. So think it'll all work out well together.
Yeah, and it definitely started off with jump on the 2025 class. The Terps land their first commit there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cornerback Jet White, 6'2", 165-pound corner out of Miami Edison. I think he's a good player. He's good. He transferred over from Orange over in California over to Miami Edison this in 2023. And again, he's been to campus a couple times. He'd been in the spring, and he had visited for 2 games back in 2022. So he's a guy that he's been familiar with Maryland. I know he's talked to me before about like just his intent to make the cross country trip to Maryland to check it out because he's had interest, things like that, and also a former USC commit. He had his top 10 released in November, included Maryland, also included Alabama. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Miami, Florida State, Louisville. So again, I think it's a good first commitment for Maryland. Get obviously 4-star from Florida. I think no Maryland fan will be upset about that. And posted 10 pass breakups, 1 interception as a junior. So think it. We'll kind of see what shakes out in the end. But nonetheless, like I said, think it'll always good to start off the class with the 4-star.
It is. And for me, always good that when we see over on Inside the Black and Gold mentions of the balloon commitment came back out, and this one came out of nowhere. So
Yeah,
always a
the
fun
outer
day when
space
we're
guy.
when we're talking about the weather balloon.
Yeah, that was that would probably still end up being the most random commitment, just because how it happened, how he announced it, everything. That was weird. So, but yeah, again, good first local commit or out of state commit, excuse me.
Yeah, elsewhere as the Terps look to it, a couple of local top 10, top sixes that the Terps make. Ahmed, the one that everybody wants to hear about, Malik Washington.
Yeah, I think that was kind of expected. Maryland, Penn State, Oregon, A&M, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. I think the three main schools that everyone's kind of looked at long has been Penn State and Virginia Tech, and obviously Maryland. I think Maryland's done a really good job. Kind of through the fall, really felt like ever since the foundation of the 2024 class was solidified, it felt like Malik Washington became, not that he wasn't before, but became a bigger focus. Where Josh Gaddis was able to kind of do a good job of building that relationship. Defensive coordinator Brian Williams, who recruits that area, does a really good job recruiting Spalding as well. Head coach Mike Loxley. So there's been a lot of effort in the league Washington already, and I think Maryland is kind of heading into the early stretch. I think I'd probably put them as the early team to beat. Penn State, Oregon, both those schools already have early commits as well. But Penn State, they're gunning all out for him as well. A&M is probably that one wild card. Mike Elko's staff over formerly at Duke had recruited Washington, so I think it'll be kind of intriguing to see what does materialize with the Aggies. But Syracuse, it feels like every single recruit I've talked to in the DMV, I've talked to a lot of 2025 over this last 7-10 days or so. Feels like 95% of them are mentioning Syracuse. Syracuse, Devin Red is a name that's come up a lot. He's been hitting this area pretty hard as well. So we'll see. Malik's timeline is official visits in April and probably make his commitment in May. So a lot of time between now and then. But as of now, I think Maryland's doing a really good job in this one.
Yeah, and then the Terps back on the trail hitting QO running back Iverson Howard.
Yeah, he's another guy. I think it'll be kind of intriguing to see what materializes. Got a chance to see him on Sunday morning out at the 480 Club, 7-on-7 practice. He's got a top 10 with Maryland, Florida, Miami, Michigan, NC State, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Virginia Tech. He's really been able to visit Virginia Tech in the past, wants to get out to Florida, has been to Maryland and Penn State so far already this season. Obviously, Jalen Harvey and Xavier Gillum, both those guys, QO guys who are 2024 signees at Penn State. But I don't know that that's going to end up playing a huge role. Not just, as in, just don't know that I really see Penn State being, the team to beat early on or anything like that. So I think this one is probably a little bit more open. I could see it probably going into a number of different ways. But James Thomas is been the main recruiter in this one. He's felt like he's been working this one for the better part over the last year. Latrell Scott, ever since he joined the program, has been able to kind of chip away with him as well. So definitely been a familiar face around College Park. So we'll see what materializes. I think between Iverson, Howard, Bud Coombs, I think if Maryland gets one of those guys, that running back spot will be pretty good.
Yeah, Terps just keep reloading in the backfield. Last thing to talk about tonight. I feel like we got to mention it. I wasn't really sure how much we would, but let's talk Talia Tungavailoa and the entrance into the portal and a strange one without a waiver.
Yeah, obviously with Talia entering the transfer portal, the biggest question is whether he's going to be able to play. And I love Leah. It's been really cool watching him just kind of grow and accomplish everything that he's accomplished and get comfortable within the program, really break out of his shell. But just really feels like as a whole, just this transfer is kind of everything that would be wrong with college football. I mean, his stance, while I understand and I get that perspective that in the 5 games that he played at Alabama, in 2 of the games, he played 4 snaps. So why should 4 snaps cost an entire season? So I get that rationale, but it's not like his college experience was taken away and this would be his last chance. If he gets denied his waiver, he would still be the Big Ten's all-time passing leader. So again, I'm just not sure that I really see the basis. It's it's unprecedented. And you know what? I mean, Maryland obviously they're working with him. They submitted the waiver on his behalf. Miami, it sounds like they're very much involved. And if everything gets approved, I would be shocked if Talia doesn't end up at Miami now. And Alabama's working with him as well. So really just feels like it's kind of setting up for an eventual approval of a 6 year. Seems like there's a lot of pessimism out there, but I got to throw it back. What have you seen from the NCAA that's going to make you say, yeah, they're going to deny this one? I mean, I have no faith, and they recognize when the money is there to be made. it's there. So it is what it is. But just a very perplexing situation, really from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think you covered the point that I would, which is this is what's wrong with college sports at this point. And I'll take a little bit of a different approach for it. That's life. The guy went in the games. There is, to me, there's nothing that said that he didn't know the rules. The NCAA is very, very, on the contrary to what a lot of people will say, the rules are out there to be found. They are given to athletes at these schools. That's whether they choose to not read the materials, not look at the ramifications for what they're doing, all that stuff. Those are the learning lessons that I will tell you every 18-year-old that decides to not go to 20 of their lectures and then fails the exam, it's almost the same thing. He went into games that he knew that they would cost him the year in the end. And the rules then were a lot different than they are now. This
Yeah,
wouldn't even be on the table going back 6 years. Also, to that same point, what more does he have to gain out of the college experience other than NIL opportunity? And yeah, I
sure.
get it. Everybody wants to win, and Miami is a place where you can win, just like Maryland is. He could have, again, could have really shattered records here, could have won Maryland games and been, that guy for Maryland football that he already somewhat is. So when you look at the situation, the only thing is the NCAA, you're right. There's nothing at this point that if they denied him this, I would be more surprised than not. I mean, I see it
Yeah,
almost as 90-10 approve over it. But at what point are we just almost allowing mistakes that aren't allowed for anybody else? The whole thing about the NCAA for the longest time was it keeps athletes the same as other college students because more than likely they're not going to play professional sports. I mean, I feel like they had that ad running forever with Jerry Rice in it that pretty much said that. And for Leah, this offseason proves that that's true for him. He's probably not going to play in the NFL. Or he would have gone to the NFL, or there's more money to be made outside the NFL, which will become very real for athletes like him. I mean, right now they're hearing rumors that Marvin Harrison is going to potentially consider staying at Ohio State. You almost have to wonder what that check looks like that they're going to hand him. It's shows so much that's wrong with the sport, and really, I just go back to the level playing field aspect of it. If that's not the case anymore, which I know many people would say that I'm on an old man rant right now, but if that's not the case, then let's just make it crystal clear at this moment that we're basically going to turn college sports into club sports. And as long as you're enrolled in the university, you can play, and eligibility is only a factor for your walk-ons at the end of the bench and guys that don't make the sport a ton of money.
yeah. And again, you talk about like the NIL component of it, and like I get it from Leah. If you're looking at someone that's, um, you know, from an NIL component, obviously he has the potential, especially at a school like Miami, could make more there than he does as a potential practice squad guy at in the NFL. And what do you think the probability of Talia hanging around by year 3 or year 5? So I get from the perspective of you want to get the money if possible, and when you say the rules are there to be made, uh, again I point back, and I've written it in 2 articles now, but was leading up to the Michigan game, Varun asked Talia, if he thought about coming back or not, and Talia was like, "I think I'm out of eligibility." So like, how do you say that then and have that not used against you? I don't know. That moment has just come up in my head like 3 or 4 times now, where it's just kind of acknowledging that this is kind of an unlikely scenario. But again, the whole thing is well, we said, just kind of what's wrong with sports. But again, just the Leah, the money component and being with his family. I think that's the obvious allure there, but again, would be a very perplexing ending. And you talk about what the college experience and what he's done, and had a chance to win more games. He definitely had a chance to win more games at Maryland, win the big ones. But let's make no mistake about it. He has rewritten the record book. So. He's definitely left a mark in college football.
Yeah, and to that point, when I talk about the experience piece of it, that's been what's been used by so many of these guys to get the extra years of eligibility. Oh, I was redshirted at this school. Oh, I didn't play at this school. I was barely. didn't have the opportunity, and that's why I'm transferring down and should get the six or transferring up. In like the case of like when you talk about, let's just use the one that we've heard about this offseason, the Corey Bullock waiver. To me, that waiver makes more sense than this one because the guy was playing FCS football for 4 years, now has a legitimate chance to be a professional athlete if he gets another year in college, or gives himself the opportunity, I would say, to confirm the ability without doubt that he'll become a professional athlete if he has another year of eligibility. To me, if we're giving guys 6 years, that's the 6th year that's there. That's when you can clearly make a case that another year at that same institution will further that person's ability to be able to succeed once they're done there.
Yeah,
When I
and
look at this one, I don't see that because he has rewritten the record book and he has had all the press and all the media and he's in the Moderna ad now, and he's had he's had, from what I've heard, great NIL in terms of what Maryland can provide in that
oh
and what
yeah,
college football can provide in that in the current format. So my question going back to it is, if we're rewriting the rule book, are we just making it so it's kind of pick and choose which guys we want to based on how much they can give back to the sport? Or are we going to present some sort of clear guideline that makes the 6th and the 5th years that are out there clear cut in definition? Because the 4 plus the bowl game to me makes every sense. If you play more than 4 games in the regular season, you've played, what is that? It's not half, it's whatever it is,
yeah.
45% of the games or 42% or whatever that number looks like. You've contributed to that team, whether you're holding the football, taking knees, or whatever. You've entered the stat book in a reasonable amount of competition for a team that was striving to win the national championship and had that legit opportunity, if not succeeded that goal that year.
Yeah, again, yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, again, I think it'll be interesting to just kind of see how it all unfolds. But the Leah, it's potentially entering the portal, going what was it? I guess after last season, even that kind of felt like, I mean, the rumors, they were there. I mean, it was not just rumors. I mean, it was real. But even then, it kind of felt like, man, like believe it when I see it. Just not really sure that I can kind of picture this. And with this whole just it's a very head scratch moment, head scratch saga. But again, I get it from a business perspective, from a potential marketing perspective of in the NIL era of being able to be with your brother. So hey, why not just be one of the 10,000 to send a waiver in the NCAA, pray and hope for the best. So why not?
Yeah, certainly. And then you know what? I'll say this too. I'll be rooting for him if he gets the waiver and he's down there. I mean, like you said, like you mentioned, at that point I'm just mad at the sport. I'm not mad at the guy. He's a great guy. He's done everything they can for this school, and he wants an opportunity to go somewhere else and play. And if that
Yeah, I
governing
mean,
body's not ready to say that, then I'll
yeah.
still be watching him on Saturday. It's just starting to ruin the sport that it's been my favorite sport my entire life.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like make no mistake about it. I mean, all the buzz is kind of this is very much family driven. Dad, who's kind of feels like all the big QBs, dads are very much involved in their process and their recruitments and whatnot. But he's well, everything is that he is very involved in how the process plays out. So I think that plays a large factor into how all of this has unfolded. But yeah, like you said, definitely nothing. It's been really cool watching him, just like I said, just grow and get comfortable within the program, and like we said before, reset the expectation at the position.
Yeah, definitely did for the Terps. Ahmed, anything else to add tonight?
No, we'll see how this week for football offseason unfolds, and obviously we had one transfer target, Monkel Goodwin from Alabama. He was someone to keep an eye on, and ended up taking one visit 2 days after he entered the portal, committed South Carolina. So chance that we see more portal action develop this week, potential staff movement this week. So we shall see, and guess we'll see how basketball fares on Thursday.
Yeah, we definitely will. Ahmed has all of your Maryland football and basketball coverage over and inside the blackandgold.net. We have all your coverage over here on the podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us where you can. Rate us, review us. Really helps us out here on the pod. For Mason Viner and Ahmed Gafir, as always, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.